Hello everyone, and welcome to Website Rewind, the internet show where we take a deep dive into various social media sites. Today's episode is about YouTube. Yes, we are going to be looking at the evolution of YouTube, their terms of service, their community guidelines, their timeline, the drama, the controversies. We're going to look at it all. From a makeshift project to a Google-run website, YouTube has really grown over the years, but also birthed unending controversies that make our eyes roll and our stomachs turn. So how did we get here? Today we're going to find out. To make this video, I actually did read through all 16 years of YouTube's terms of service and their community guidelines, which was quite an experience, let me tell you, and I've come out on the other side to help enlighten you, whoever you are, about YouTube and the perplexing truth behind this website. As you can imagine, this video has taken an incredibly long amount of time to make because YouTube is massive. But saying that, I'm sure that you will get a kick out of some of the secrets that I've uncovered. So let's get into it. YouTube is an online video streaming platform that was first created in February of 2005 by three former PayPal employees, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and Jawed Karim. Interestingly, YouTube started out with the intention of being a dating site where users would upload videos talking about who they were and what they wanted in a partner. They would then upload these videos and attach them to their profiles so that they could better attract their ideal type. This idea sort of flopped, and instead YouTube was directed with the idea of being used for messaging your friends and sharing videos with one another in designated friend groups. But this idea, again, was changed. The site kept with the typical theme of video uploading, but instead of a dating site or video messaging platform for exclusive friend groups, the direction of YouTube was reformed to allow anyone to upload to the site where, then, their videos could be viewed by anyone, indiscriminate of location or association. This design made a unique experience for users of the YouTube platform. One minute you could be watching a girl vlog in her bedroom, and immediately after you could watch a couple of guys create funny skits about Pokemon. There was this free to create whatever you wanted air to the platform, which was rather unique and fascinating during a time when cable TV still reigned supreme. Instead of companies and networks determining what we got to watch, the choices for watching video content were put in the hands of random internet dwellers like you and me. The videos uploaded to the platform in 2005 were typically random, and could be any video length. They could be about any kind of thing, and be uploaded by any kind of person, and be uploaded in various countries around the world. Overall, this was quite an interesting discovery for the internet. The very first video uploaded to YouTube was an 18-second clip of Jawed at the San Diego Zoo, and I just have to say, as of around 2020, he alluded to there being a part 2 to his adventures at the zoo. And then he linked a cover of Donkey Kong Country's Bonus Room Blitz by Clayton Stroop. So there might be a part 2, but even if there isn't, I have to admit, this man has good taste in music. I mean, who couldn't like Donkey Kong Country? During 2005, YouTube faced exponential growth due to its easy integration of Adobe Flash, which at the time helped to make uploading videos simple enough for users. YouTube also had a feature implemented for videos posted, which allowed users to share the content that they were watching, and that too made the website even more viable for growth. This combination of easy uploads and video sharing helped to boost YouTube and keep people interested in the constantly bustling content that was on the site. YouTube racked millions of views throughout the year, gathered investors, and had a growing team of employees. All in all, everything looked to be going pretty good for the trio of ex-PayPal employees and their newfound business. That is, until Google bought YouTube. But wait, why did that happen? Wouldn't a quickly growing site with investors and employees try to hold its ground when offered a deal from its competitor? Well, to understand that, we need to take a look at the terms of service. YouTube's original 2005 terms of service were the following. By using the website, you agree to the following terms and conditions as well as YouTube's privacy policy. The terms apply to all users of the site, including those who upload video content. The site may contain third-party links to other websites that YouTube does not control. YouTube is not liable for you using any of these third-party websites, and you should make sure to read the terms and conditions as well as the privacy policies on these websites. You can only use the website for personal, non-commercial purposes. You will not copy any part of the website in any medium without YouTube's prior authorization. You will not alter or modify any parts of the site other than for the intended purposes. To access some features of the site, you need to make an account. Never use another person's account without permission. You must provide accurate information when creating your YouTube account. You must keep your account password secure, and you must notify YouTube immediately if your account has been breached or is being used without your permission. YouTube won't be liable for any losses you face, but you can be liable for the losses YouTube and others may face if you use accounts in unauthorized ways. Don't use bots, spiders, or other offline readers. An exception can be made for public search engines who use spiders to copy materials from the site for the purpose of creating publicly available, searchable indexes, but not caches or archives of such materials. YouTube can revoke these exceptions if they want. All content on the website is either owned or licensed by YouTube, subject to copyright and other intellectual property rights. Do not download content from the site. YouTube does not guarantee any confidentiality for any user submissions. YouTube just has a non-exclusive, royalty-free license to showcase your content on their site. You are solely responsible for what you post and whether you have the license to post it. Don't break copyright, publish falsehoods or misleading information, submit material that is unlawful, obscene, defamatory, libellous, threatening, sexual, harassing, hateful, racially or ethnically offensive, or encourages conduct that would be considered a criminal offense, give rise to civil liability, violate any law, or is otherwise inappropriate. You cannot post advertisements of solicitations of business or impersonate another person. YouTube does not endorse any user submissions, opinions, or advice in videos. YouTube does not endorse copyright infringement. It has the right to terminate accounts and remove all content submitted that breaks copyright. If someone infringes on your copyright, you can file a DMCA claim against them. YouTube isn't responsible for you finding various user submissions inaccurate, offensive, indecent, or objectionable. You are allowed to use the embedded video player to showcase your user submissions on third-party websites, like blogs or your own website, for personal non-commercial purposes only. These videos only function on an as-available basis, and YouTube can discontinue this aspect of the site, including any linked or embedded content at any time. So in the case of a video getting deleted, that's it. That video that is linked on a blog site is no longer available. There are no warranties, and you use YouTube at your own risk. YouTube is not liable for anything that happens to you when you use the site. You agree to defend, indemnify, and hold YouTube harmless against any and all claims and damages arising from the following: your use of the website, your violation of the terms of service, your violation of any third-party right, like copyright, or any claim that your user submission has caused damage to a third party. You must be 13 or older to use the website. The website's jurisdiction is in California, and thus the site and its users basically follow California law. The entire point of websites having terms of service is to prevent potential legal issues from occurring. Sure, terms of service are there to set up guidelines for users to follow, but really, the point of them is to keep people in line and make the intentions of the website clear so that if someone tries to sue the website over something that has been made clear in the terms of service, there will be no liability and thus no lawsuit. Really, YouTube's terms of service were designed to do just that, push a potential lawsuit off of the website's hands whenever a legal issue arose. But despite this, a website having terms of service doesn't mean that it's invincible when it comes to legal trouble. Say hypothetically you run a website with terms of service that specify no copyright infringement as a requirement for uploading content, but people do it anyways. What do you think's gonna happen? What happens when you or your company can no longer handle the sheer volume of daily uploads that break the law? What happens when you have a bunch of users continuing to upload inappropriate or inappropriately obtained content to the site? Well, the likelihood is you're gonna get sued. And that's the theory for why Google bought YouTube. The theory is that YouTube was a lawsuit waiting to happen, mainly because of the levels of copywritten material that were being uploaded onto the site. From movies to songs, people just uploaded what they wanted without fear or care for copyright infringement. There were so many uploads to YouTube at the time, and many of those broke copyright. People were just uploading whatever they wanted without fear or care for copyright infringement. And as a result, a finite team of people working to moderate YouTube was just not going to be enough to keep copyright infringement from occurring on the platform. The reason YouTube was sold to Google could easily be summed up as, hey, we don't want to get sued, you, take this. And this kind of makes some sense given that if a lawsuit did take place for copyright, it would be kind of expensive, and YouTube was kind of just starting to get the ball rolling, so it could very likely be that they didn't have the funds, or they didn't have the manpower, they didn't have Content ID, they didn't have the resources to be able to calculate for a lawsuit, and they could have just flopped if they, were sued over copyright. Google could have also seen some potential in YouTube and wanted to buy it out. And this, alongside the potential for the website being sued, would give both sides of this transaction motivation to actually transact. Google very well could have just wanted a thick slice of YouTube's, delicious content pie, and YouTube very well could have just been desperate enough to want Google to buy the company so that, hey, they weren't the ones getting sued. Now it's Google getting sued. And also, who wants to drown in DMCAs, am I right? Oh, and another thing, even if Google had seen literally no potential in YouTube, zero, to make any form of profit whatsoever, they might have just wanted the site to keep it away from competitors like Microsoft or Yahoo or other competitors. Who knows? It could have been anything. Either way, though, Google bought YouTube and changed the site. Not just a little, but a lot. In November of 2006, YouTube was purchased by Google for $1.65 billion worth of Google stock. More money than I've ever imagined in my entire life. Let's just be honest, at best in my imagination, I'm a millionaire. Alright, so in 2006, the terms of service for YouTube remained quite similar to those in 2005, but in 2006, the very first community guidelines were rolled out. The opening to the community guidelines starts off condescending, but also kind of cute. Respect the YouTube community. We're not asking for the kind of respect reserved for nuns, the elderly, and brain surgeons. We mean don't abuse the site. Every cool new community feature on YouTube involves a certain level of trust. We trust you to be responsible, and millions of users respect that trust, so please don't be one of them. We review videos flagged as inappropriate. Okay, this one is more about us than you. When a video gets flagged as inappropriate, we review the video to determine whether it violates our terms of service. Flagged videos are not automatically taken down by the system. If we remove your video after reviewing it, you can assume that we removed it purposefully, and you should take our warning notifications seriously. Take a deep breath, read our terms of use, and try to see it from our perspective. If you find other videos on YouTube with the same violations, please flag them so we can review them as well. Don't cross the line. Here are some rules for what you shouldn't post. No sexually explicit content. Don't post videos showing dangerous or illegal acts. Real violence is not allowed. No shocker content. Respect copyright. We encourage free speech and defend everyone's right to express unpopular points of view, but we don't permit hate speech which contains slurs or the malicious use of stereotypes intended to attack or demean a particular gender, sexual orientation, race, religion, or nationality. Also, there is zero tolerance for predatory behavior, stalking, threats, harassment, invading privacy, or the revealing of other members' personal information. Anyone caught doing these things may be permanently banned from YouTube. Many of these terms of service are very reasonable, but I just need to say something about the free speech section of the community guidelines. You cannot in one sentence say that you encourage free speech on your platform only to not permit hate speech, which is technically a form of freedom of speech. Now, I'm not here to be an advocate for hate speech. It's not my job to tell people what they should and shouldn't say or how they should and shouldn't think. And it's not my job to tell a private company like YouTube that they are restricting people's speech because they're restricting hate speech. I'm just saying that if we're regulating speech on the platform, it technically isn't freedom of speech. If you endorse freedom of speech, you endorse all the speech. Good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter. Technically, hate speech does fall under the category of freedom of speech as long as it is not a call to violence. Now, saying that, I'm not here to tell you guys what you should and shouldn't say and how you should and shouldn't react to such content, and I'm also not saying that content regulation on the platform is inherently a bad thing in respects to its speech. God, I don't know, whatever. I know that this is a little bit weird. I know we're kind of getting into the little more political aspect of this, but it's actually more important that I point this out for the context of what YouTube in future starts deeming hateful content. You'll notice that over time, just like in the changes that we've faced in society over these past, 15, 16 years, you'll notice there's a drastic shift in what content is and isn't considered hateful, what content is acceptable on YouTube. YouTube slowly over time does change what it deems hateful content on the site based on the views of society, based on the views of the media, based on the views of other individuals, and most importantly, based on the laws in California. And this is why you'll notice that content on the site that was once acceptable is now no longer acceptable. You'll notice this for various videos online, being once okay and having to be later removed, because although at one time they fell under things like comedy, criticism, humor, edginess, they then started falling under the category of hateful content and breaking the community guidelines. You'll notice the definition and the thresholds and the types of content that are considered hate speech and hateful content will always be changing and very difficult to pinpoint the exact, threshold for, because nobody really knows, and it's based off of individual interpretation, which is why all this content keeps getting taken down, put back up, left up for a while, taken down, mostly just taken down, and this is why I wanted to point that out. I'm not saying to start a political debate, alright? I'm not here to do that, it's not my job. The 2006 community guidelines also outline if you have an account terminated, you are prohibited from making a new one. You'll notice that if YouTube deletes your channel, they're going to be manhunting you for the rest of your existence on trying to have another channel on YouTube, which is why a lot of people then go from having their own YouTube channels to being the hosts of channels that are registered in other people's names. A change to YouTube that was a bit more noticeable compared to the terms of service changes was actually the change made to video upload lengths on the platform. By March of 2006, a 10-minute limit for video uploads was added in as a means of preventing people from uploading full versions of TV shows, movies, and other forms of copywritten content onto the site. This limit would be only increased to 15 minutes by 2010, and in later years to 12 hours or a maximum file size of 256 gigabytes. This 15-minute limit can only be bypassed even now if you have a verified YouTube account, and everything goes out the window for live streaming on YouTube. You can have live streams that are way more than 12 hours long. For some reason, you can have 24, 48-hour live streams. As long as you're streaming and your computer is beefy enough, you can literally stream as long as you want. But when it comes to just uploading videos, the longest you can have is a 12-hour video. 2007 brought in many new changes to YouTube. For starters, the community guidelines had added no gamed thumbnails, spamming tags, or creating dummy accounts, probably in response to people clickbaiting viewers and also forcing channel growth. The terms of service were also changed quite drastically throughout this time. YouTube started linking the privacy policy and community guidelines at the top of their terms of service for easy access. And they also reformatted quite a few sections of their terms of service. They added in a section known as General Use of the Website, Permissions and Restrictions, which specified that you agree to not distribute in any medium any part of the website, including but not limited to user submissions. User submissions, by the way, literally refers to just comments and videos. You agree not to alter or modify any part of the website, including but not limited to YouTube's embedded player or any of its related technologies. You agree not to access user submissions or YouTube content other than the video playback pages of the website itself, the YouTube embedded player, or other explicitly authorized means YouTube may designate. You agree not to use the website, including YouTube's embedded player, for any commercial use without the prior written authorization of YouTube. Prohibited commercial uses include sale of access to the website or its related services on any other website. Use of the website or its related services for the primary purpose of gaining advertising or subscription revenue. The sale of advertising on the YouTube website or any other third-party website targeted to the content of specific user submissions or YouTube content. And any use of the website or its related services that YouTube finds in its sole discretion to use YouTube's resources or user submissions with the effect of competing or displacing the market for YouTube content, or its user submissions. All of that basically implies that they don't want you to make a clone of YouTube, especially using parts of YouTube like the embedded player that you can link on other websites. They don't want you to rip off the content of the site. Prohibited commercial uses do not include uploading an original video to YouTube or maintaining an original channel on YouTube to promote your business or artistic enterprise. Using the embedded player to show YouTube videos on an ad-enabled blog or website, provided the primary purpose of using the embedded player is not to gain advertising revenue or compete with YouTube. Any use that YouTube expressly authorizes in writing. If you use the YouTube embedded player on your website, you must include a prominent link back to YouTube on the page containing the embedded player, and you may not modify, build upon, or block any portion of the embedded player in any way. You agree not to use or launch any automated system, including without limitation to robots, spiders, or offline readers, that accesses the website in a manner that sends more request messages to the YouTube servers in a given period of time than a human can reasonably produce in the same period by using a conventional online web browser. Notwithstanding the foregoing, YouTube grants the operators of public search engines permission to use spiders to copy materials from the site for the sole purpose of, and solely to, the extent necessary for creating publicly available searchable indexes of the materials, but not caches or archives of such materials. YouTube reserves the right to revoke these exceptions either generally or in specific cases. You agree not to collect or harvest any personal identifiable information, including account names from the website, nor to use the communication systems provided by the website, like comments, emails, whatever, in any commercial solicitation purposes. You agree not to solicit, for commercial purposes, any users of the website with respect to their user submissions. You will otherwise comply with the terms and conditions of these terms of service, YouTube community guidelines, and all applicable local, national, and international laws and regulations. YouTube reserves the right to discontinue any aspect of the YouTube website at any time. Basically, all of this just means that YouTube doesn't want you to make a YouTube clone and then monetize your own content or other people's content on your own YouTube clone instead of having things just remain on the website. YouTube doesn't want you to rip off parts of their website, whether it be from your own channel or from other people's channels. They don't want you to take comments, they don't want you to take any personal information, they don't want you to take any content from the site. The only thing that you really can do is technically you can put your own videos or other people's videos for context of blogging. But although you can put videos on these blog sites and use things for context, you might not be able to monetize the site. The section "Your use of content on the site" is new, but it actually uses 2006's intellectual property rights section, specifying again that all content on the website is either owned or licensed by YouTube, everything is subject to copyright and other intellectual property rights, and not to download content from the site. Your use of content on the site also states that your viewing of the site should be for personal uses only, and that you should use the website as it's intended. Don't hack into anything or get into places that you shouldn't, and do not distribute content from the site onto other platforms. When using YouTube, you may be exposed to user submissions from a variety of sources, and YouTube is not responsible for the accuracy, usefulness, safety, or intellectual property rights from these user submissions. Some submissions may be inaccurate, offensive, indecent, or objectionable, and YouTube isn't responsible for them. Then, in your user submissions and conduct, it states, with your account you can submit video content and comments, which are both categorized as user submissions. You are solely responsible for your user submissions and affirm that you have the appropriate licenses, rights, and consents to post them. You retain all ownership of your content, but YouTube has a non-exclusive, royalty-free license to use your content on its site. Your content cannot break copyright or leak trade secrets, and your content must follow the community guidelines. Account terminations earned their own section, and DMCA claims also earned their own section, with explanations of how they could be issued to videos and how you can counter them. The changes made in 2007 didn't only involve community guidelines and service term changes, but also the launch of the YouTube Partner Program. Yes, in December of 2007, YouTube launched its very own YouTube Partner Program. It was a new way of benefiting the platform's creators for all of their hard work, and through the power of monetary incentive, this gave many people a lot more motivation to keep producing content and also to get into producing content. It was a very interesting addition to the platform at the time. The very first launch of the Content ID system was also debuting in 2007. And this couldn't come soon enough. You see, YouTube between 2007 and 2009 would face legal action against companies due to copyright infringement on the YouTube platform. Some of these companies included Viacom, Mediaset, and the English Premier League. who all filed lawsuits against YouTube claiming that the website had done too little to prevent users from uploading copywritten materials onto the site. Viacom demanded $1 billion as compensation for the damages of over 150,000 unauthorized clips on YouTube that had been viewed an astounding 1.5 billion times. During this very same court battle, Viacom won a court ruling which required YouTube to hand over 12 terabytes of data detailing the viewing habits of every user who had watched videos on the site. This court battle would actually go on for 7 years, and eventually in 2014 would have a non-disclosure agreement signed to end it all. As a likely result of the legal issues that YouTube was facing during this time, they started working on a content ID system for the automatic detection of uploading videos that infringed on copyright. This was even viewed by the CEO of Google as necessary to help in future with evading lawsuits, such as the one that was from Viacom. The Content ID system was originally called Video Identification and later became known as Content ID. Over the years, YouTube would invest millions of dollars into their Content ID system to perfect it. This, in turn, would make the system very capable of finding accurate uploads that looked very similar to the reference files that were of sufficient length and quality in the Content ID system. In total, Content ID had cost around $60 million to develop. By 2012, Content ID would account for over 1/3 of the monetized views on YouTube, and in 2016, Google would have paid out approximately $2 billion to copyright holders, as opposed to the $1 billion in 2014. During the whole Viacom YouTube kerfuffle with Content ID, another issue was taking place between YouTube and the company Audible Magic. YouTube, before being bought by Google in 2006, had Audible Magic sign an agreement to license their own Content ID fingerprint technology to YouTube. When Google bought YouTube in November of that year, the license was then transferred to Google, and the agreement overall lasted until 2009, where it was then terminated. But in 2014, Google obtained a trademark for their own Content ID implementation, and then Audible Magic sued them on the basis that they owned the Content ID trademark, and therefore Google was committing fraud. By 2017, everyone would be asking if Content ID would be stripped from YouTube as a result of all of this that was going down, but so far there still hasn't been a clear resolution to the situation. But let's go back to the early days before we start getting into craziness about lawsuits and insanity. 2008 through 2013 brought little negative change to YouTube, despite there being a lot of legal issues taking place. In fact, most of YouTube's users were rather pleased with the overall conduct on the site. After all, this was known as the broadcast yourself era of YouTube, and this was literally known to be one of the best times to be a YouTuber or even just a viewer. You had Shane Dawson before he was canceled, and Brandon Rogers, who was like Shane Dawson but funnier and still not canceled. You had Jenna Marbles and Trisha Paytas, sure, but you also had gamers like PewDiePie, and no, not Dream, and oh no, we didn't have Dream yet, guys, don't worry, we didn't have Dream yet, and we didn't have Mr. Beast being charitable, don't worry about that yet, that's gonna come later. But, you know, you had the Yogscast, you had Sly Fox Hound, you had Paperbat VG, you had Minecraft YouTubers, you had Cryotic, but we don't talk about him very much anymore because, you know, you just had a lot of stuff. You had Living Tombstone starting to make sick beats, you had all of that good stuff, you had Minecraft, you had My Little Pony, you had, you know, chaotic tweenage energy coursing through the veins of YouTube. You know, you had Angry Video Game Nerd hitting top-notch tier. You had, you know, Channel Awesome. You had all kinds of fun stuff. You had Smosh. There were memes, sure, but those memes were like golden age memes, guys. Like, it was great. You had the beginnings of, like, animations really starting to pump through YouTube. You just had some good stuff going down, and there was so much comedy, so much energy, so much fun that was taking place. And, you know, it was just really fun. Everyone was having a good time. And there was very little problem to pick with YouTube and the content being put onto YouTube at the time. Overall, YouTube was pretty massive. It made a lot of money, and it made YouTubers a lot of money. But most importantly, it made viewers happy. It put people who watched YouTube videos in a good mood. You know, everything was chill and level, and everyone was just there to have a good time. And you know, despite the terms of service and community guidelines being what they were, they didn't really affect the more edgy and comedic forms of content on the site at the time. People were paid pretty well, monetization wasn't a problem at the time, everything was pretty chill. And, you had a lot of people pumping out crazy and cool creative works. Overall, things on YouTube during 2008 to 13 were a lot more genuine, and they were just a little bit less difficult for people to kind of deal with. A quick run through of YouTube during 2008 to 13 in terms of the terms of service was mainly just YouTube moving around text, rewording paragraphs, and condensing them into different subjects, as well as changing the names of said subjects. But overall, not much had actually changed in terms of the content of the terms of service. Everything was pretty chill, actually, during 2008 to 13. That 5-year period was pretty good. A lot of people were pretty calm, and sure, there was drama at times, and definitely a little bit of weirdness that was going on, but it stayed pretty mundane, and there were definitely some glitches, but things kind of ran pretty smoothly on the platform at the time, especially compared to what we have now. There were also a few design changes that took place that made the platform look a lot smoother. By 2013, the previous boxes that thumbnails used to be placed in were swapped out to make a more borderless look, which I think was a good decision because it makes the site look a little bit more smooth. Overall, YouTube was starting to look really, really good, and it had a lot of users who were really, really into it, and a lot of creators who were very, very creative. And then 2014 happened, and a lot of things happened in 2014. And that concludes episode 1 of the history of YouTube. I'll be seeing you next week with episode 2. If you don't want to wait, and you want to see the full series now, it is all on my Patreon. Consider checking me out on there, as well as liking and subscribing and doing all that trash.